She was supposed to be invisible. That was the job, really. The unwritten clause buried at the bottom of every contract Maya Kwon had signed in 9 years of high-end hospitality work. You are a mechanism. You are a set of hands. You pour, you smile, you disappear. Maya was very good at disappearing. At 30 years old, she was head of quality assurance for Horizon Hospitality Group, which meant she spent most of her working life in tailored black uniforms, making sure other people's evenings ran with the precision of a Swiss watch. She was also a fat woman in an industry that prized the lean and the ornamental, which meant she had spent a long time perfecting the art of taking up less psychic space than her physical frame suggested. Soft voice, efficient movements, eyes that never lingered on anything long enough to be noticed. She was good at it. She was, in fact, the best. Which was why Conrad Bates, the hotel's general manager, had pulled her aside at 7:15 that evening with the skin tone of a man who'd just discovered a gas leak in his kitchen. The private dining room on the 34th floor had a guest, Darian Sokolov. The name alone sent a visible tremor through Conrad's jaw. He doesn't like new faces, Conrad said. He doesn't like questions. He doesn't like anything except the 2009 Barolo and absolute silence. Maya, I need you in that room because you're the only one I trust not to flinch. Maya had taken the assignment without blinking. That was also part of the job. The private dining room at the Sinclair was nothing so vulgar as merely expensive. It was the kind of room that existed outside of time. Dark walnut panels, a single long table of polished black marble, and lighting so dim that everything existed in amber and shadow. No windows. No evidence of the city grinding on below. Just 6 men in bespoke suits and the particular silence of people who had nothing left to prove to anyone. Darian Sokolov sat at the head of the table. The hotel's security file had offered careful, thinly worded information. Tech investment, real estate, private equity, a network of holdings across a dozen countries, 43 years old, born in Tbilisi, Georgia, immigrated to the United States at 19 with reportedly very little, and left a trail of contracts and acquisitions that courts in 4 countries had tried and failed to untangle. He was not what she'd expected. He was quiet in the way that genuinely dangerous things are quiet, not suppressed, not restrained, just naturally still, dark hair going silver at the temples, pale eyes the color of river ice that moved through a room the way a camera lens moves, taking inventory without announcing itself. He wore no watch, no rings. His suit was the color of graphite and fit him the way expensive things fit men who don't need to advertise. Maya stood near the service credenza, napkin over her forearm, breathing slow. They were speaking Georgian. Not the formal, school-taught Georgian that drifted through diplomatic functions and academic conferences. This was something older and rougher, the Tbilisi street dialect, clipped and swallowed into the back of the throat, dense with idiom no language class had ever bothered to codify. Maya knew this dialect the way she knew her own heartbeat. Her mother, Tamara Kwon née Beritz, had come to New York at 22 with $40 and a stubbornness that outlasted 3 recessions. She had raised Maya in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sunnyside, Queens, speaking Georgian at the dinner table, on the phone with her sisters in Tbilisi, and loudly and without apology whenever she was angry, which was often. Maya had grown up fluent without ever meaning to be. She was staring at the middle distance above the credenza and understanding every word. The man to Sokolov's right, lean, angular, with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, was explaining, with increasing desperation, that the discrepancy in the Zurich account had nothing to do with him. His name was Yev, she'd gathered, from a single slip earlier in the evening. $14 million. Gone between a wire transfer confirmation and the receiving bank's records. He had checked the timestamps. He had checked the routing numbers. He swore on his daughter's life. Darian Sokolov had not looked at Yev during this. He was looking at his wine glass, tilting it slightly so the Barolo caught the amber light. Fully vermotively, he said, "You can't lie with numbers." "Me'amov Tani," Yev said, "I didn't steal." Magram Vigaka Mutana, but someone did. The man to Sokolov's left, younger, with the overdeveloped neck of someone who spent too much time in gyms, said a name, Petir, and then he was the last one with access. Sokolov finally looked up from his wine. Maya looked at the painting on the wall, a still life, pears in a silver bowl. She stared at it with the concentration of someone memorizing it for an exam. Her phone buzzed. Not a ring, not a notification. The triple pulse of the override line, the one that only activated when something had gone catastrophically wrong with a managed event. Tomorrow morning, Maya was running a 400-person corporate gala for a pharmaceutical company at a midtown venue, 8 months of logistics, a catering contract that represented 30% of Horizon's annual revenue. The buzz came again. Sokolov's eyes found her. "I apologize," Maya said, her voice perfectly level. "There's an emergency with tomorrow's event. I'll need one moment." "Stay," Sokolov said, one word, quiet as a door closing. Not a request. Maya nodded, turned her back to the table, and pressed into the far corner of the service alcove. She answered the call. Kwon. Mrs. Kwon. The voice was oily and accented. Konstantin Dreher, a Vienna-based importer who was supposed to be delivering 60 cases of a specific Austrian sparkling wine for the gala's reception hour. A wine the pharmaceutical CEO had written into the contract personally, by name, because he'd had it at a colleague's wedding and never gotten over it. "I am afraid there is a problem with the shipment." What problem? Customs, a delay. To expedite the release, there is a fee, $12,000, wired tonight. Maya closed her eyes. "The wine cleared Austrian customs 4 days ago. I have the documentation. You're trying to extort me 12 hours before delivery." These things are complicated. If those cases are not at the loading dock by 7 tomorrow morning, you will never work with another American hotel group for the rest of your career. I will personally call every contact I have in this industry and describe this conversation in detail. "American threats," Dreher said and laughed. "I am in Vienna, Miss Kwon. Goodbye." He did not hang up fast enough. Something snapped inside Maya's chest. 9 years of managing ungrateful vendors, incompetent contractors, and guests who looked through her like she was plate glass. 8 months sourcing that specific wine. 40 minutes standing in this room, terrified to breathe, while men discussed what she increasingly understood was a planned death. Her feet ached. The rigid waistband of her uniform was digging into her sides. And she was absolutely, definitively not going to let this man end her career with a fake customs delay. Her grandmother's voice surfaced from somewhere deep in her muscle memory. "Gegos," she said into the phone, dropping into Georgian without registering that she had done it. Her voice fell to something low and flat and ancient. "Gegos, Konstantin, Senisi, Gavik Shen. Shut up, Konstantin, you little worm. I will destroy you." The clinking of glasses at the table behind her stopped. Maya didn't notice. The adrenaline was moving too fast. "Ragindoda, Tormetiati, Sen Pikrob, Rommi Bavshviva. You thought 12,000 would work on me? You think I'm a child? Kavalgantiad, Shvidi Saatse, Tekveni Datvitet, Arikneba Damatebiti Fasi. Tu Arikneba Miftanot Sakme. Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, your truck with the full delivery. No extra charge, or I take this to every court between here and Austria." "Da," Dreher whispered, "yes." Maya ended the call. She stood facing the walnut panel for 3 full seconds, the adrenaline beginning to recede, cold clarity rushing in to take its place. Then she turned around. Every man at the table was looking at her. Yev's mouth was fractionally open. The man with the thick neck had stopped mid-exhale. Even the 2 men at the far end, who had spent the entire evening seemingly indifferent to everything, were watching her with the focused attention of people who had just seen something unexpected cross a room they thought they controlled. Darian Sokolov was sitting completely upright. He had been slouched slightly before, the comfortable posture of a man used to occupying every room without effort. Now he was still in a different way, sharper. His pale eyes were locked onto Maya with an intensity that felt physical, like a hand closing around her throat. He wasn't looking past her. He wasn't cataloguing her the way men of his world usually catalogued women who looked like her. Briefly, dismissively, filed under irrelevant. He was looking at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Like she was a puzzle he had just decided to solve. He had heard every word. He knew she spoke the dialect, which meant he knew she'd understood everything they had said all evening. "Is the emergency resolved, Miss Kwon?" he asked in English. His English was flawless, barely marked. "Yes," Maya said completely. "Good." He didn't look away from her. "We're finished for the evening." Her car was on level B2, a 7-year-old grey Civic 11 New York winters parked under a flickering fluorescent light near the stairwell. She was 10 feet from it when the footsteps spread. Not behind her, ahead, left, right. She stopped. Yev stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, hands loose at his sides. Behind her, the soft shuffle of the thick-necked man cutting off the elevator. "Long night," Yev said. "I'm going home," Maya said. She widened her stance slightly and thought about the tactical pen in the outer pocket of her bag. "Mr. Sokolov would like to speak with you." Deeper in the garage, unhurried footsteps echoed off concrete. Darian Sokolov walked out of the shadow into the buzzing fluorescent light and stopped 8 feet from her. Jacket gone. Just the graphite dress shirt now, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked more dangerous without the jacket, like the last layer of civilization had been quietly checked at the door. He looked at her the way no one in her professional life ever had. Not past her, not at her body with the flat, practiced indifference she was accustomed to from men of his wealth and stature. He looked at her like she was the most interesting problem he'd encountered in a very long time. "Tbilisi," he said. "Which district?" Maya blinked. "My mother, she's from Vak." "My grandmother was from Sabatalo." He tilted his head slightly. "You grew up speaking it." "At home, I didn't think. I was angry." She held herself still. "I understand that what I heard in that room tonight is none of my business. I have no intention." $14 million, Sokolov said. "I don't know anything about $14 million. You heard us discussing it." Maya said nothing. "Miss Kwon." He took a step closer. She didn't step back. He noted this. "You managed the vendor logistics for the Hargrove acquisition dinner in March at the plaza." She had. "I don't see what that has to do with." That acquisition involved a supply chain running through 3 vendors. One was a company called Meridian Cold Storage. The name landed strangely. Maya's brain, trained over 9 years to map vendor relationships the way other people mapped social ones, made a connection before she'd consciously chosen to pursue it. "Meridian," she said slowly. "Temperature-controlled freight, documents, pharmaceutical samples, fine art, among other things." Maya was already moving through what she knew. 8 months ago, during a routine vendor audit, she had flagged Meridian for submitting 2 conflicting invoices for the same delivery window with different manifest numbers. She had assumed a clerical error, marked it for follow-up. The follow-up had been buried under a crisis with a different client and had never surfaced again. "The missing transfer," she said carefully. "It didn't disappear in the banking system." Sokolov went very still. "You moved it physically," Maya continued, her logistics brain unfolding the architecture as she spoke. "Beer instruments or high-denomination documents tucked inside a legitimate cold storage shipment. Temperature-controlled freight gets less scrutiny at customs. The manifests are complex. The inspections are faster. Meridian runs freight out of Newark. If someone in your organization wanted to intercept a physical transfer before it reached the end destination, they would need access to the Meridian intake logs." She paused. "And the Newark yard manager." "Who is a man named Petr Vasil," Sokolov said quietly. 7 years on my payroll." He did not look away from her. "You worked that out in under a minute." "I've been auditing vendor chains for 9 years. I know what double manifests look like." She paused. "The Meridian truck scheduled to deliver to the Armitage Gala. Tomorrow morning is the same truck that ran the Newark cold storage route on the date of your transfer. I have the delivery schedule in my email. If Petir loaded anything during that window, it's probably still in transit. They don't clear specialty cargo between runs." The garage was very quiet. Sokolov looked at her for a long moment. Something had shifted in the way he was standing. The measured stillness still there, but beneath it, something that looked almost like wonder. He reached a slow decision that was visible only in the slight release of tension across his shoulders. "You can't go home tonight," he said. "I have a gala to run in the morning." "I know." He reached into his shirt pocket and produced a phone. "You'll run it, but you'll have company." The Armitage ballroom at 7:15 in the morning looked like the inside of a tornado wearing a bow tie. Maya moved through it the way she always did, like the eye of a storm, quiet and absolute at the center of everything spinning around her. Sokolov stood near the east entrance, watching. He'd come with Yev and a third man, Kolya, broad and silent as a closet door, and the three of them in their dark suits were generating a circumference of personal space that the venue staff instinctively gave a wide berth. The staff filed them under private security and moved on. Maya filed them under problem I don't have time for, and directed her attention to a florist who had delivered cream roses instead of ivory, and was explaining, with impressive confidence, that they were the same thing. "They are not the same thing," Maya said. She pulled out her phone, called the secondary florist. She kept in her back pocket, because she always kept a secondary florist in her back pocket, and arranged a replacement delivery in 4 minutes. Then she turned to the catering supervisor. "The Austrian sparkling wine is on dock 2. Don't let the driver leave until I've signed the manifest personally." Dreher had sent all 60 cases, no surcharge. She felt Sokolov's eyes on her back across the ballroom and did not look at him. At 9:40, with 90 minutes until guest arrival, Maya was running a final walk of the room when something snagged at the edge of her vision. 2 men in white server jackets were pushing through the north service door. Her brain ran its audit automatically. She knew her staffing roster by name and face. She had signed every assignment sheet herself. These 2 men were not on it. The jackets fit wrong, too rigid across the shoulders, the kind of stiffness that came from body armor underneath rather than starch. Their shoes were wrong, thick-soled, tactical, against venue regulations. And they were moving with a purposefulness that had nothing to do with carrying trays. Their eyes were fixed on the east entrance, where Sokolov was standing, glass of water in hand, looking at his phone. Maya moved. She didn't stop to think about it. The same reflex that threw her between incompetent vendors and catastrophic outcomes hijacked her body entirely. She cut a diagonal across the ballroom floor, heels clicking fast on the polished marble. The first man's right hand was moving under his jacket. Maya hit him from the side with every pound of momentum she had. She was not a small woman. She was a sturdy, solid, full-bodied woman moving at speed, and when her shoulder connected with his ribs, the impact was violent and total. They crashed sideways into a tower of stacked champagne flutes, and the sound was spectacular. A cascading explosion that silenced the entire ballroom in an instant, 1,000 pieces of crystal going down at once in a wave of cold water and broken glass. From across the room, she heard a muted crack. Yev's weapon, suppressed. The second man dropped, clutching his knee, his gun skidding across the floor. She was tangled with the first man in the wreckage, his elbow catching her cheekbone hard enough to white out her vision. She grabbed his wrist. He wrenched free. He had his gun up. Sokolov crossed the room in 3 strides. He did something fast and definitive with his forearm that ended with the first man's skull against a marble pillar, and the man sliding to the floor. Silence. 400 empty chairs, every staff member motionless. The string quartet hadn't started playing yet. The stillness was absolute. Sokolov turned. Maya was pushing herself upright through broken glass and standing water, her palm bleeding where she'd landed on a stem. He was beside her before she'd gotten fully up, dropping to one knee on the wet floor without hesitation, his hands finding her forearms. Maya, not Miss Kwon, just her name low and stripped of all the composed authority he'd worn all night. Where are you hurt? My hand, my cheek a little. She looked up at him. His face had done something she didn't have a word for. The calculated stillness was completely gone, replaced by something rawer and more urgent, a look she recognized even through the adrenaline as the particular anguish of someone discovering, at the worst possible moment, that they care very much what happens to another person. You threw yourself at an armed man, he said. He was going to shoot you. Sokolov stared at her. You've known me for 18 hours. You needed someone to throw themselves at an armed man, Maya said. I was closest. A sound came out of him that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so involuntary. He steadied her as she found her feet. Yev, he said, not looking away from her. Da, boss. Collect them. Speak to the venue manager. No guests see anything unusual. He kept his hand on Maya's arm, and Petir. Already handled, Yev said very quietly. Sokolov nodded once. Then he looked at Maya, really looked at her, the way he'd been looking at her since the moment she'd turned around in that dining room, and said, We need to get your hand looked at. I need to call the Crystal Rental Company, Maya said. I have 400 guests arriving in 80 minutes, and the champagne tower is destroyed. Sokolov blinked. If they're drinking sparkling wine out of water tumblers, Maya continued, the CEO's wife will call my company's CEO before the first course is served, and I will spend the next 6 months explaining a contractual shortfall instead of. Make the call, Sokolov said. She made the call. The replacement flutes arrived in 37 minutes. The gala ran without incident. The CEO's wife cried happy tears during the champagne toast and told Maya it was the most beautiful event she'd ever attended. The penthouse on the 41st floor had the kind of view that made Manhattan look like something assembled just for the occasion, all light and grid and dark river at the edge of everything. Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling window while a medic taped her palm with the quiet efficiency of someone on Sokolov's payroll, which meant asking no questions and making no eye contact. Sokolov stood a few feet away, jacket off, watching her. Petr confessed, he said. He'd been moving physical assets through Meridian for over a year, using cold storage manifests to hide the transfer documents inside shipments of temperature-sensitive materials. No one audited the cargo weight differences. A pause. 14 million, recovered. The rest is handled. Maya accepted this without asking what handled meant. You should go, she said. I should go. I need to file the vendor incident report and debrief my staff and… Maya. She stopped. Sokolov crossed the room slowly. He stopped in front of her, and she had to look up at him, which was not something she was used to. She was tall, and she took up space, and most men in her professional life had spent years finding ways to manage their discomfort with both facts. Sokolov looked at her like the space she occupied was exactly right, like she had been measured for this room specifically. You traced a $14 million theft in under 2 minutes using a delivery schedule on your phone, he said. You identified an armed hit squad by their shoes. You tackled an assassin. His voice was very quiet. What do you want from this? Maya blinked. What I want. You saved my life tonight. In my world, that's not something I walk away from. He held her gaze steadily. Tell me what you want. Preferred supplier status for Horizon at every hotel property your holding company owns, Maya said, without hesitating. My vendor contract renewed at a 20% increase, and you never send anyone to corner me in a parking garage again. Sokolov was quiet for a moment. That's significant. You have 14 million reasons to agree. I do. Something shifted behind his pale eyes. Is there anything else? The question sat between them. Maya thought about 9 years of being the most competent person in every room she entered and the least visible. She thought about the expression on Sokolov's face when he dropped to one knee on the wet ballroom floor and said her name like it was the only word he could find. She thought about the way he looked at her, not past her, not around her, not at a version of her he'd decided on in advance. At her, all of her, like she was something he was genuinely, deeply grateful to have found. That part, she said, might be negotiable. The corner of his mouth moved. I have a proposition. You seem like someone who usually does. My operations cross 7 countries, supply chains, logistics, vendor networks. I have attorneys, accountants, and fixers for every problem I've encountered, except the one I apparently needed most. He paused. Someone who can look at a discrepancy and see exactly where the money went before the money is gone. Someone I can trust. You met me yesterday. I know what you did today. Maya looked at him for a long moment, at the measured stillness, at the pale eyes that saw through things, at the way the laugh had come out of him, surprised and involuntary, when she'd said she needed to call about replacement glassware while they were standing in a room with 2 unconscious men on the floor. I'm an event coordinator, she said. You're a logistical genius who has spent 9 years making other people's dinner parties run on time. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair back, his touch brief and careful and precise. Come work for me. Your terms, your title, whatever you want to be called. His hand dropped, but his eyes didn't. And no one, in any room, in any city, in any country where I have influence, will ever look through you again. Maya had spent 30 years being looked through. She had spent 30 years learning to shrink herself into the corners of rooms that didn't belong to her, making her voice softer, her movements smaller, her presence easier for other people to manage. She had been good at it. She had been so good at it that she'd sometimes forgotten there was another version of herself underneath. The version that shouted in Georgian in a dining room full of dangerous men. The version that hit an assassin like a freight train. The version that asked for replacement champagne, flutes with blood on her hand. She looked at Darian Sokolov, who had sent men to corner her in a parking garage, and then spent an entire gala watching her work with an expression she was only now correctly identifying as reverence. I want it in writing, she said. He smiled. It was small and real, and it changed the entire geometry of his face. Everything I valued, Darian Sokolov said, I put in writing. The city burned below them through 41 floors of glass. All that noise and light and relentless motion that had spent a decade looking right past her. Maya looked out at it and felt, for the first time, like she was standing exactly where she belonged. Not pressed into the service alcove of someone else's life, not folded small to fit inside another person's frame. At the center, taking up every square inch of the space that was hers. She had spent 9 years being the best at being invisible. She was done with that now.